share this with you just because. So when we first had got you guys on the show, it was really like a Mikey discovery, and he had come across some tracks from the record prior, and he was like, oh, you got to check these guys out, like, so and you'll have to forgive me just because I forget the name of it, but he showed me the song that you guys had, which is essentially just cats and
Fashion Forward.
Fashion Forward, right? So Fashion Forward, great tune, but I remember hearing it and I remember being like, oh yeah, these guys sound like Panic at the Disco. That's pretty cool,
Yep.
Now fast forward to like this new record that like has like completely blown me out of the water, because it's like, it's really nothing like that. It's so diverse. It's so interesting. And I mean, like, you can really see like musicianship. You guys have upped the ante. Production, you've upped the ante. And, this record is really kind of the magnum opus, it seems. But, it kind of is interesting how you get sold on a band, right? And like, as soon as Right Through Me came out, like, I was like, oh my God, like this is the real deal. And then all the other singles that you guys have put out since then have also been awesome. So I got to give kudos to Mikey, because you wouldn't have ever been on my radar. And now you guys are, and I couldn't be anticipating like a record anymore. So like, F yeah, let's go.
Dude, thank you.
You're very welcome, man. So on that note, just kind of like maybe talk a little bit about what went into the creation of this record, and how you wanted to be a little bit different from the record prior. Did you guys go in with like kind of a blueprint of, okay, this is what we want to sound like, this is how we want the songs to come together or get structured? Or was it like, you had some music fleshed out, and once you got in the studio and you realized like, oh wow, we can like, kind of pull and tug this and sort of like do the silly putty thing where you just kind of stretch it to be a little bit different? Is that kind of how it ended up for you guys, or was everything fleshed out beforehand?
So I feel like with our first record, and the material before that, we all come from metal and hardcore. Like, that's all of our backgrounds. We all met playing in different metal bands. And that's where we've done most of our touring before the home team. So I feel like when we started the home team, we had this like, we wanted to stay away from metal and focus on like something more accessible. And so I feel like we were always trying to fit ourselves into this mold of like what a modern pop punk band should sound like. And to be totally honest, like, that's just not really what any of us listen to. We listen to more heavy music than pop punk. So we don't really, we're not, in our personal lives, we don't listen to a ton of like the active pop punk bands.
Sure. Yeah.
And I feel like we were always trying to fit that mold. And I think one of the big moments for me was when I discovered the band Don Broco. Not necessarily like sound wise, but just kind of like attitude and approach to music wise. Because those guys do whatever the hell they want. They are ahead of they set the trend. And it really like opened my eyes to like, dude, we can incorporate the shit that we like. We don't have to do this like cookie cutter pop punk and like fit into what other bands are doing. We should just do what we want to do.
Yeah.
So when we started writing for this record, we had in the back of our minds, like, okay, this one needs to be different. We can't just do the same thing. We want to do something that sounds more like that represents us as like musicians and as like music listeners better. But we also had like this idea of, okay, what can we do to be weird? Like what are other bands not doing? So John had this idea of, all right, I'm going to incorporate 8-string guitar on almost every song, and like not in a, down tune breakdown kind of way, but in more of like getting that really low frequency, like kind of like sub bass feel to everything.
Yeah. Just a real quick, like one of the first things I noticed when I heard the chorus and Right Through Me was that I was just like, oh my God, there's so much like depth in this chorus. And like, and the interesting thing is like I pick apart things because I'm kind of a music nerd, right? So like you hear the chorus the first time and it's just like straight chords with that like like that 8-string underlying, and then like you hit the chorus again and you get him like riffing on the chords, and he's got those, oh man, it's just like, it's like, I wish there was more like out there that like would do stuff like this. So you can continue, but I just had to like interject with that point, because it's just like, that was one of the first things I noticed, as I was like, oh, this chorus is so heavy. And then the chorus comes back and I'm like, oh shit, that's like the same chords, but he's like, you know, riffing on it and on these 16ths. And it's just so cool, man.
And that's one of the things, like, we get asked a lot, like, how would you describe your new sound?
Mm-hmm.
Like, who would you compare it to? And I feel like we always struggle with finding like a really good comparison, because we're like, oh, it kind of sounds like this, but like,
mm-hmm.
not really. But it kind of sounds like this, but not really.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like we have something that's pretty unique, and not a lot of bands sound like that.
Mm-hmm.
We were a little nervous when we finished. Like, I always say every musician is delusional. We all think that our next shit's going to be the stuff that pop off. I've been saying that since I was 15, that like, oh, this EP, this is the one, I'm blowing up. But this is the first time I really feel like we did something that is, people are going to hear and be like, I've never heard anything like this.
Mm-hmm.
Like with our last record, we get kind of the same, like 5 or 6, like, oh, it kind of sounds like Panic at the Disco, kind of sounds like, you know, some Fall Out Boy reference, like it's the same couple comparisons. But with this, so far with the singles we put out, it's been all over the place. Like, people don't know what the hell they're listening to, and we get comparisons to, like, people are hitting us up saying like, oh, this reminds me of, like, you know, Breaking Benjamin, but with a little bit more, like a little bit like softer. And then we're getting other stuff. We're like, oh, it's it's more like Issues sounding.
Sure.
But overall, in like the songwriting process, we kind of really found our stride like 3 or 4 songs in. I remember it was the song Move It or Lose It. That was the second single we put out.
Yeah.
I remember we've always had, like, we all have our own different writing styles.
Mm-hmm.
Brian comes from like a more technical, like progressive metalcore background. Like, that's what he's really into.
Mm-hmm.
So when he would write stuff, it oftentimes he leans a little bit more towards like the complicated side of things.
Sure.
John, our guitarist, is much more interested in like the old school pop punk, Fall Out Boy, Jimmy Eat World style. And so he would write stuff that was like kind of overly simple.
Mm-hmm.
But Move It or Lose It is the first time where I remember like being in the room when they combined forces, basically. And like John wrote something that was a little bit too simple, and then Brian like added to it, and then they like met in the middle, and like it felt like they found the perfect balance. And when we finished that song, that was the one where we're like, yo, that is what we need to do. Let's do more of that.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like really what kickstarted the whole album writing process, because that was like the 3rd or 4th song we wrote. And then after that, we pumped out like the rest of the album in a couple months.
So I got one more question, and then I know Mikey keeps breathing in to ask a question, but like I'm just going for it. So looking through, so I want to talk about the Veil of Maya signature that's on the last track of the record. But Another Night Alone with You, that's got Yvette from Covet, right?
Yep.
So I love Covet, and that's such a super cool thing. Who in the band was like Covet was on their radar to get that? I keep calling it a signature, but what is it really called?
A feature.
A feature. That's what they call it.
Yeah.
Excellent. Number one podcaster. But yeah, so like who was on, like, who had like Covet on their radar? Cause like, they're just like, they rip, man. I love them.
Yeah. So that was John's doing.
Okay.
So John hit up Yvette for, I think, I'm not sure how they first met, but he hit her up to buy some art from her, because she's just super talented artist.
Mm-hmm.
Guitar player, obviously, but like multi-instrumentalist and also an artist.
Yep.
And he hit her up to buy some art. And so he bought some art from her, and they just, kind of became friends over the internet, just chatting for a while. And then I think he went down to the Bay Area, on like a little trip, and just met up with her and kind of pitched the idea like, hey, we've got a song. We think you would be, you'd be a great fit as a feature. And from what he told me, she was really excited about like kind of branching out of the shreddy prog world.
Yeah.
Because once you get into that, like that's what she's known for, is being, the crazy shred guitar player.
Yeah.
Which that's what Covet is, but like they're also so, so melodic. Like they could be placed anywhere.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I first saw them when they were opening for Dance Gavin Dance, which, that like they have mainstream appeal now.
Yeah.
But we actually don't, Yvette is purely a vocal feature on that. So we wanted to have her do something that is like different and let her showcase like her singing too. So she sings on it and it sounds fucking killer.
Yeah, no, it really does. And the funny thing is like when I think of Covet, I kind of like think of like that sort of math rocky, like Maps and Atlases, like some of that other like kind of Sargent House top shelf stuff. Like that's where like it gets me. But and that's the thing about Covet is that, their music is really so like, you could put them, on the same path as like Animals as Leaders, or you could put them in the same path as like a band like A Great Big Pile of Leaves or something like that, where like they have that versatility. And I think that's kind of the cool thing about the home team is like you guys have this versatility in you where like you could fit onto a pop punk show, you could probably fit onto like an R&B or like a soul show, or you could even, I don't know if you could like, you could play like a metal show. Like, I don't know like how that would really go, but like you definitely could kind of like explore any of those different options. And I think having that versatility in music today is excellent, because like that means that like any tour that comes a knocking, you can just be like, yeah, we can fit on that for sure. And then you now open yourself up to being able to do all of this other stuff where, back 15 years ago, it was like, unheard of that like a pop punk band and like, a hardcore band would like tour together, with the exception of like a small few with like, Shai Hulud and splintering off into Newfound Glory, or then a little bit later where, Stick to Your Guns and The Story So Far have their relationship. But like everything was always like, oh, it's got to fit into this mold. Like you got to have like Punchline and Spitalfield and like it got to all be together. But now you can, be out there and kind of use your versatility in a way that can get you more gigs, get you paid. So I think that's awesome. And the feature is super cool. I think it's a great track like all together, but I really kind of have a lot of interest on that last track that you guys have, which I'm dying to listen to. I know it's Veil of Maya. And then I think it's Jeff, who is in, what is it? Arch Enemy, right? Like, so, so it's like all of this like death metal stuff. So how does that fit in?
So we met. So the Veil of Maya feature is Lucas, the vocalist.
Okay.
It just worked out that he doesn't have like his own Spotify page, so it pulls up the Veil of Maya thing.
Sure.
It's also a little bit marketing, because then we end up on Veil of Maya's page. So
exactly.
there's that too.
Of course.
But Yvette and Jeff have their own Spotify pages, so that's why we linked them. So we met Lucas in Minneapolis in 2019. We were on just a full US headliner, and we played a show with his band, with his other band. I think they're the Airway is what they're called. Yep. And so like they opened for us, and so we were at the venue, and we had a couple friends there, and we're like, I think Brian was like, dude, I'm pretty sure that guy's the singer of Veil of Maya. And I was like, what the fuck is he doing here? And it turns out we were playing with like his pop rock band. So after the show, we just met and chatted for a little bit. And I think we ended up getting food after the show, and just kind of hit it off and stayed in touch. And when the song came out, when we were recording the song, we hit him up and we're like, dude, we'd love to get a feature on, one of these songs. So we sent him a couple options, and we ended up deciding on this track, Danger. The craziest part is the Jeff Loomis solo. I'm not gonna spend time talking about how sick it is. You're just gonna have to hear it when it comes out. That song has, without a doubt, like the heaviest section we've ever written, and it's not like not like a breakdown, like a, palm muted chugga chugga breakdown.
Yeah.
But kind of similar to the way that like the Right Through Me chorus is really big.
Yeah.
That the end of that song definitely has like the heaviest thing we've ever written. And there is a fucking bonkers Jeff Loomis solo at the end of it. We had nothing to do with that. The guy that that is our engineer, works with Jeff a lot. And so we were just in the studio talking like, dude, it'd be so sick if we had a solo here. And he just pitched, he's like, I bet I could get Jeff to do one. And we're like, no fucking way. No, you can't.
That's so wild.
So we just texted him and we sent him the track and he's like, oh, this is sick. Yeah, I'll write something. And honestly, we kind of thought he was going to phone it in a little bit. Cause we're like, he's like a, virtuoso guitar player.
Yeah.
He's like a generational talent shredder. And we're like a pop rock band with some, with a kind of a heavy part in one song. He was like, I love this. And he fucking went all in. So that's actually the only song that we haven't shown even our Patreon.
Oh, wow.
We've leaked every other song on the record. So the people in our Patreon have heard the entire record already. It's like one by one. That's the one where like, you are going to experience this for the first time, like at high def, streaming on Spotify when you listen to the whole thing.
Yeah. It's awesome. I love it.
Now, you mentioned your audio engineer. I know on your first record, you guys worked with Casey Bates. Who'd you guys work with on this one?
So the last record was like produced, mixed, and engineered and mastered by Casey. So we just went to him. He did everything. He was involved in the pre-production, the whole thing. With this one, we went basically the exact opposite route. We had our buddy Sky from Issues, or I guess now at this point, 21 Pilots.
Yeah.
He flew out and produced the record for us. So he came in and helped with the pre-production and like a little bit of songwriting, and played bass on the whole thing. We had our buddy Aaron Smith. He is the guy who worked with Jeff Loomis. His old band, Seven Horns, Seven Eyes, was a big, like a prog band on Century Media back in like the 2010s. So we actually recorded our first couple EPs with him too. So he engineered it. And then we had Seb Barlow from Neck Deep mix the whole thing.
Oh, sweet.
And then Chris Crummett mastered the whole thing afterwards. So we went like to this guy and then to this guy and then to this guy. But at the end of the day, I don't think we could have picked anyone better to like, it sounds exactly how we wanted it to sound. I think we got the perfect group of people in to like bring our vision to life and be able to like blend the heavy aspects of like the 8-string and all the super low tunings that we use, with the fact that vocals need to be super present and have kind of like that pop feel where it's like mostly, it's like heavily about the singer.